My name's Rachel. I'm 26, living in Portland, Oregon, trying to find a way to fit music back into my life without breaking the bank. After weeks of scouring Craigslist, I found an ad that seemed too good to be true. Affordable piano lessons from experienced teacher. All ages welcome. The post was from an elderly man named Mr. Fenton, who promised a comfortable, personalized experience in his home. It felt a little old school, but his rates were half of what most teachers were asking. I emailed him and set up a trial lesson. The first time I arrived at his house, I noticed how neat everything was. The furniture looked like it hadn't been moved in years. The smell of old books and polished wood filled the air. And the walls were lined with antique photos of people I couldn't quite place. Mr. Fenton himself was friendly enough, with a soft voice and steady hands. He seemed genuinely excited to teach and made me feel welcome, though he had one peculiar habit. As he led me into the living room, he gave a gentle but firm warning. Please, just stay in this room. Some parts of the house aren't safe. I shrugged it off. Old people can be weird about their homes, right? We started the lesson, and Mr. Fenton was actually quite a good teacher. He had this gentle way of encouraging me, showing me the right techniques and correcting my posture. I decided I would come back again. But over the next few visits, I started noticing some things that didn't sit right. Every door in the house had these heavy locks on the outside, not just normal locks, but thick bolts that seemed way out of place. And once, while playing a piece, I heard something, a soft, distant sound like someone crying. I froze and glanced up, but Mr. Fenton's face gave nothing away. "Shall we continue?" he asked, in that same calm tone, as if he hadn't heard anything at all. The more lessons I took, the more insistent Mr. Fenton became. "You're progressing so well," he'd say. "We should meet more often, maybe twice, or even 3 times a week." His eagerness seemed strange, almost desperate. I could tell he didn't have many visitors, but something in his tone made me uneasy. I couldn't help but wonder if he was lonely, or if something darker was keeping him isolated. One evening, I decided to arrive unannounced, just to see what he'd say. When I reached his house, though, something was different. All the doors were slightly ajar, and the air inside was cold, a chill that went right to my bones. My footsteps echoed through the empty hallway, and I realized how silent the house was, as if it was holding its breath. Following a strange instinct, I went toward the back of the house, where a faint light seeped through the crack under a door. Pushing it open, I saw a trail of belongings, women's scarves, a half-torn book, an old hairbrush, all leading toward the basement stairs. My stomach dropped. I realized I wasn't the first person to come here. I hesitated, every part of me wanting to turn and run, but something made me press forward. I crept down the stairs, each step heavier than the last, and the faint crying grew louder. The basement was dim, but I could make out shades. Boxes stacked against the walls, blankets piled on the floor, and in the corner, a frail woman crouched, her eyes wide with terror. She looked up at me, her lips trembling as she whispered, "He won't let us leave." I didn't get a chance to respond. The basement door creaked above me, and I heard the heavy click of a lock sliding into place. Mr. Fenton's shadow appeared at the top of the stairs, his calm demeanor replaced by something cold and sinister. "Rachel," he murmured, his voice echoing down the stairs. "I told you, some parts of the house aren't safe." Panic surged through me, but my feet felt rooted to the ground. The other woman clutched my arm, her fingers icy and frail. She whispered urgently, "We have to find another way out." But as I scanned the basement, every possible exit seemed sealed, and the only thing that filled the room was the sound of Mr. Fenton's slow footsteps descending the stairs. My name's Amy, I'm 27, and I live alone in a small, cozy apartment in Portland. I'm a sucker for quirky decor and, honestly, a bit of a scavenger. I'll browse Craigslist for hours, looking for odd things to spruce up my place. I love vintage stuff, the kind that has character. That's how I found this listing under Antiques one late Thursday night. The ad read, "Abandoned family portraits, one of a kind." It caught my eye immediately. Abandoned family portraits. The description was brief, something like, "Old family portraits left behind in an abandoned home. Unique, only a few left." It struck me as eerie but intriguing, and I thought they'd add a cool vintage touch to my living room. I messaged the seller, who simply went by the name K, and within an hour he'd responded. We agreed I'd pick them up at a small shop on the outskirts of town. The next day, I paid the seller in cash, took home 3 portraits, and started imagining how they'd look on my walls. I didn't think much of it at first. They were typical black and white photos of families dressed in old-fashioned clothes, like from the 1920s or 30s. They looked a bit worn and yellowed, which only added to the charm. But when I hung them on my living room wall, I started to notice small, strange details. In each portrait, the families, mothers, fathers, children, looked straight at the camera. Not unusual for old photos, but their eyes felt unsettling. I'd walk past, and every time, it seemed like their gaze followed me. I laughed it off, thinking it was just the effect of old photography, but it was enough to give me a slight chill. A few days later, things started getting weirder. I began to notice small changes. The expressions in the photos seemed to shift ever so slightly. The mother in one portrait, who I swore was smiling when I hung it, now had this tense, almost pained expression. And in another, the father's eyes seemed to widen each day. I didn't tell anyone. I figured maybe I was just overthinking it or imagining things, but I couldn't shake the feeling that I was being watched. One night, I was cleaning, dusting the frames, and checking out the details in the photos, trying to see if I'd missed anything. That's when I noticed something that made my stomach drop. In the corner of one portrait was a clock hanging on the wall, identical to the one in my living room. I leaned in closer, squinting, and then my heart nearly stopped. In the corner of a mirror, there was a faint reflection. My reflection. I felt a rush of panic, my mind racing. How was that possible? Was this some kind of sick prank? I grabbed my phone and tried calling the number Kay had given me, but it was disconnected. I scoured Craigslist for the listing, hoping for more information, but it was gone, like it had never been there. The following day, I woke up and forced myself to look at the photos again, thinking maybe I'd hallucinated the whole thing in a moment of paranoia. But when I looked, I saw something new. In one of the photos, a figure was now seated on a chair that I recognized. It was from my bedroom. The figure's head was down, but there was something achingly familiar about the posture, like it was me, sleeping. I tried not to look at the photos after that. I thought about taking them down, but a twisted part of me needed to know if they'd keep changing. Each day, new details appeared, like someone had captured snapshots of my life in those frames. The last straw was a week later when I saw my own face in one of the photos, standing at my front door, looking utterly terrified. I smashed the frames, threw them in a dumpster, and barely slept for the next few nights. I've checked Craigslist 100 times, but there's no trace of Kay or his ad. To this day, I still feel eyes on me in my apartment, as though those families left something behind, a fragment of themselves. Or maybe they took a piece of me with them. My name's Eric, 32, living in Phoenix, Arizona. A few weeks ago, I needed to move apartments on short notice, so I hired a cheap moving service I found on Craigslist. It was last minute, and I figured I'd save a few bucks. They showed up 2 hours late. 2 guys, barely spoke, wouldn't even look me in the eye. One of them kept glancing at my phone and personal items, especially the old family photos I'd laid out for packing. They worked in silence, moving things, occasionally muttering to each other in whispers. I brushed it off. I thought they were just shy or odd. After they left, I noticed a few items missing. Small things, sentimental. My dad's old pocket watch, a framed picture of my grandma, a keychain from high school. I assumed they'd turn up as I unpacked. But then things got weird. A day after the move, I found a note under my mattress. Nice place. A day later, a photo of my kitchen table turned up in the bathroom, one I'd never taken. Then a crumpled receipt from a store I'd never been to appeared on my desk, dated the day I moved in. When I tried calling the moving company, their number was gone from my phone, just vanished. That night, my phone rang. My own number flashed on the screen. I picked up, and all I heard was laughter, my laughter, but distorted, like it was playing from a broken record. Now, every night, I lock my doors twice, and I still don't know who has my things, or why they left me those notes.